Welcome. This is our last unit for this course, Interviewing and Counseling Skills 1. We are talking all about feelings today and how that makes you feel. So in your textbook, it's observing and reflecting feelings. So for today, we're going to talk about naming feelings and emotions. We're going to talk about the brain and our emotions and how that sort of operates. We're going to talk about the purpose of reflecting feelings, and we're going to do some applied practice. So some activities in terms of identifying techniques to reflect feelings. I'll also post a handout online that you can use to really practice your own skill of reflecting feelings when working with clients. All right, so I've got a clip here. As I say there, it's about 6 minutes long. Now, I've been having some difficulties with my YouTube videos when I'm including YouTube videos within my own recording. So I'm not going to play that video during this recording. The link is there in your PowerPoints, and I really do encourage that you access that video and watch it on your own. It's only 6 minutes. I'm going to show you sort of an image of it. You've seen videos like this before. So it's of a counselor practicing, I think they're mock sessions, but a counselor practicing with a pseudo client. And you'll see lots of reflection of feeling and lots of identifications of feeling by the client in the video. There's even some examples of the client judging herself for feeling certain ways, like feeling guilty for, feeling angry about something, or not understanding why she's feeling a certain way, which in itself is a judgment, like I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why do I feel this way? So a really, really, really useful clip to watch. And like I said, it's only 6 minutes long. So this will help you to really get a good applied understanding of this skill. So check it out. Okay. So in our conversation, in your learning from your textbook, the authors say that emotions are biological engines. So let's just think about that for a minute and what that means to your understanding. Emotions are our biological engines. They drive us into action. And in your psychology class, we've talked about this as well, right? In motivation and emotions, we talked about the unfolding of emotions happening, which typically occur in that older part of the brain, the limbic system, right? So emotions occur that produce, anger, sadness, frustration, happiness, joy, pleasure, all of those things. And then it can drive our behavioral outcome, our actions towards other people in our world around us, or towards the world, or even towards ourselves, right? So in that sense, emotions are our biological engines. They drive us, they get us going, and they produce action. Have you ever seen a toddler throw a tantrum? If you haven't, if it was not a pandemic, I would invite you all over to meet my 2 and almost a half-year-old son because he is sort of in that typical 2-year-old phase that they say, the terrible twos. I hate to call it that because it's not all terrible. But man, oh man, he's emotional. He goes from like crying and upset to laughing and happy. And the slightest little things can disrupt a toddler because their brain is still developing, right? They don't have the executive advanced functions that us as adults do. And yet, I would wonder if you've ever seen an adult throw a quote unquote tantrum, because adults do too. And oftentimes when an adult is throwing a tantrum, they, like a toddler, are acting in those primitive centers of their brain, the limbic system, their newer brain, their higher order thinking, their logic, and their, sound decision making is kind of turned off. And they're in the limbic brain. And oftentimes that happens when we're tired, when we're fatigued, when we're underslept, when we're tapped out, when we've got overwhelming stuff happening, too much on our plate, then we sort of fall back on that older part of the brain because we're too overwhelmed and bombarded to engage the newer brain. So again, emotions are our biological engines. Emotion regulation, so regulating our emotions, keeping them kind of manageable, is how we operate inward and outward expression. So emotion regulation is this term, and we use it a lot in psychotherapy, and it's important to know as a counselor for you guys as well. It's helping your clients to identify when they're dysregulated so that they have power and control to engage regulation of their emotions. Because again, if emotions are driving behavior, then if we're feeling dysregulated, we're probably going to be engaging in maladaptive types of behavior. A key aspect of the prefrontal cortex is the executive functioning, which I've been talking about, that higher order thinking, and it helps us to control and interpret our emotional responses. But as I mentioned, when we're overwhelmed or tired or anxious, having a panic attack, that executive functioning turns off. We can't really engage with it, and we rely on our limbic system. So then we're functioning from an older brain and kind of the survival mode of our brain. So the long-term goal of counseling for you working with clients is to help them improve their emotion regulation. And I ask you why. I'm sure you can come up with many answers when thinking about why that's an important part of counseling. So in order to help our clients with emotion regulation, we kind of want to work on a bit of our own. And the very beginning of that is honestly to expand our emotion vocabulary, to be able to identify our feelings. So let's review the following 6 primary emotions and maybe think about related words or different intensities. So when I've done this live in class, I'll usually get somebody to volunteer to write up those emotion words on the board, and I'll ask the class, what are other words for sad? And students will say depressed. Students will say down, upset. So we'll come up with a list of words that are kind of synonyms with sad, and then I'll ask, can we rate the intensity of those synonyms? So is depressed at a sort of higher intensity than sadness or a lower intensity than sadness? Well, typically people would say higher intensity. It means like ultra sad to be depressed. Upset, is that higher or lower than sad? What would you rate the intensity? Now that's going to vary for each individual, and there's also going to be lots of consistencies. So when you're working with your clients, your job is to reflect what you're hearing, reflecting the keywords with the emotional piece to help them and yourself identify what's going on for them biologically, what's going on in their body, what is their brain engaged with, what are they feeling in response to the things occurring in their lives, or the things that they're doing in their lives or not doing in their lives. What is the emotion piece? Can we name it? Because that's really important. Once you name it, then you can work with it. So sad, mad, glad, scared, disgust, and surprise are the 6 primary emotions. And this gentleman, Paul Ekman, which you've learned a bit about in psych as well, Paul Ekman studied emotions cross-culturally, across a bunch of whole different cultures across the world. And he found that those emotions are primary emotions that are displayed in similar ways through facial expressions across all cultures, no matter who. When we're sad, our face turns down into a frown. When we're happy, we smile and our mouth turns upwards. Everybody cross-culturally, those are facial representations of those emotions. So you can count on your clients having some level of experience of these 6 primary emotions, unless, of course, they have some sort of, they might have brain damage, or it depends on the client population you're working with. They might have difficulties expressing emotions or identifying emotions. So again, that becomes part of the work. Nonetheless, it's really important to name emotions. So I would encourage you to print this slide or jot down those words and come up with a couple of synonyms for each of them, and you rate the intensity so that you're expanding your own emotion vocabulary. So emotion meaning, sadness. Sadness can lead to depression, which then leads to the cycle of inaction. Again, we talked about that in psych. Mad, anger. Anger can motivate us to take action. It can go kind of in a positive direction or a not so positive direction. It can lead to impulsive reactions that we perhaps might regret in the long run, or destructive behaviors. But it can also lead to self-advocating, or advocating for a group, advocating against oppression and things. Anger can fuel that fire and can be used in good ways. Glad. We want more of this. Basically, if you identify strengths and positive experiences and you see your clients smiling while reflecting on these things, we want more of that. So draw on those strengths, reflect those back. Wow, I really notice you light up when you're talking about your kids, or you light up when you're talking about your schoolwork. You sound so passionate about it. I'd really like to hear more about what brings that passion to your life. Reflect that for your clients so that they can share more of the good. Scared, fear. Okay, so this is related to anxiety. This can be related to phobias. This can be related to avoidant personality types. And scared might also lead to inaction, or it might lead to action and avoidance of whatever it is that's provoking the anxiety or the fear. Okay, so again, emotions to identify. What is it that you're feeling fearful of? What is fueling this anxiety? What triggers it for you? Can we identify that? Can we name it? Can we talk about the intensity of the fear, of the anxiety that you're experiencing? Okay, so exploring that with your clients. Disgust is the avoidance of unhealthy, feeling disgusted the way my spouse acted in response to, or feeling, disgusted that my teacher said what they said in the class the other day, So disgust can also fuel powerful behavioral responses. Okay, and again, it's naming it and exploring it with your clients. And then surprise, which can be pleasant or scary, but it opens the way to change. Okay, so again, identifying, why was that surprising for you? Why did that catch you off guard? What is it about that sort of led to this being a surprise for you? And exploring it, naming it, and again, following with your client the meaning behind the emotion. Okay, so really exploring the emotion vocabulary. And again, I'll say repeatedly, helping your clients to name the emotion. It's a really important thing. And if you're feeling uncomfortable with emotions, if you don't like talking about feelings, then this is the time to really practice, because it's a really important skill to be able to do with your clients, even if you yourself feel uncomfortable with it. So yeah, just kind of finalizing the slide, it's imperative to work through rather than to deny our emotional experiences. We can try, and perhaps you've done that before, but we learn that through emotion suppression, trying to tuck it away, trying to hide it, trying to pretend like we're not angry about that, we're not surprised by the way somebody in our life acted, trying to like stifle that, it usually creeps back up, and then it can lead to maladaptive behaviors in other ways. Bad is stronger than good. So just really working through those emotions and not identifying them as bad emotions or good emotions, just emotions that happen that are normal for us to experience that we need to name, not bad or good. Okay, so our wonderful brains, I've talked about this a little bit and you've learned a bit in your psychology class. So remember Piaget? He was all about cognitive development in children. And he also said that there's no cognition without emotion. We don't have thinking without emotion, and we don't have emotions without thinking. They go hand in hand. So when we're talking about emotions and we're reflecting this with our clients, we're thinking about the structure of that limbic system, the older brain. And this is laid out in more detail in the appendix of your textbook. So appendix 4 in your textbook, you can look at more detail. Here's a brief overview. We have this amygdala, our PFC, which is our prefrontal cortex, our hippocampus, and the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal glands. Okay, so we have these 4 structures. Obviously, there's more than that in our brain, but these are the structures I'm talking about in relation to emotion. The amygdala is our alarm bell. So the other day, my son learned about fire alarms. He learned about, we have this one in our basement that's plugged in, and when you press the button, it starts beeping, and then it starts beeping, and then it sets the alarm off, right? And he now knows, like, if a fire alarm goes off, that means we leave the house. And we were just teaching a bit about fire safety. He's 2.5, so he's young. So now the only thing he remembers is that the alarm is scary. It means a bad thing, right? So the amygdala is like our fire alarm in our brains. It is the alarm bell that goes off. It's scanning the environment for what's going on, like a fire in the house, and it's telling us something is wrong. You need to do something about it. Fight, flee, freeze, right? The fight or flight response. The amygdala sets it off and tells us in times of emergency, I'm going to override our logical thinking because we're in survival mode now, right? Amygdala does that. So then the PFC, when it's allowed, the prefrontal cortex, the higher order, the newer brain, it helps to label the emotions. Okay, so that's what you're working on with your clients. It helps to label the emotions as feelings, and when possible, it helps to regulate action, but not if we're in anxiety, panic attack mode and amygdala is like firing. Okay, so when emotion regulation breaks down, like I said, the amygdala is going to override that PFC function. The hippocampus, this is an interesting piece. The hippocampus is where we house memories. It is responsible for remembering. So why is that important to emotions? Memory and emotion. Why would we be talking about those brain structures together on the same PowerPoint slide? Because we can think about things like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety, those types of disorders that are related to the memory of trauma and scary emotional stuff, right? So it's intimately tied in, the memory, with the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So the alarm that went off, the label and the name we gave to that situation, housed in our memories, and then it comes to creep back up and visit us again, because our brains are meant to be structured for survival, and our memory is an important part of that. We need to remember the things that are bad, that are there to harm us, that are there to scare us. We need to remember those things so that we're on alert, so that we can survive them the next time. So you can imagine why clients who have post-traumatic stress disorder have this very challenging road ahead of them to work on rewiring those pathways in the brain and allowing themselves to feel safe again in whatever way that looks or means to them, right? So that's why the hippocampus is on this slide, because memory is integral to our emotions and our naming of them. And then lastly, but not least, is the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. So here we're talking about the nervous system as well as the endocrine system, because this ties in hormones in our body as well. So there's some integration there. So the HPA axis has the physical role. Its responsibility is to take this information that's coming through the nervous system and then send it out through the body in the way of hormones, right? So you've probably heard of cortisol before. So cortisol floods through our body for good reason, to help take action and all that sort of stuff when we're in panic mode, right? But too much of that can obviously cause harm and damage. There's been research to talk about, weight gain is one thing, too much cortisol happening, as well as other autoimmune type stuff. There's lots. Heart disease can result from too much cortisol. Lots can happen from too much cortisol. Which again is why it's our job to work with our clients in identifying the emotions, identifying their habitual response to the triggers and the situation in their lives, validate the why, understand that it's there for a reason, it's been built into their lives for protective reasons. So it's not, again, it's not bad or good, it's there, it's just that it's not maybe serving a healthy purpose anymore. And we want to explore that, and we want to pull that out and pull that apart to really help our clients to identify what's happening there. Okay, so again, I'm going to bring up the analogy, and I'm going to try to help with some images so that you'll remember what each of these brain structures are responsible for. So the amygdala is the alarm bell. I tried to find a picture of a fire alarm. The prefrontal cortex is the watchtower. So it's like up above the brain, and it's looking over and it's naming the emotions as they come through, if it's allowed and not overridden, of course. It might be in hindsight that things are labeled and remembering of the sort of anxious response. Hippocampus is the memory. It's like RAM in a computer. It's where we store and house memories. Okay, this is safe, this is not, I can go here, I can't go there. Certain individuals, like a adult male or an adult female harmful person because maybe abuse from a parent when they were younger, so it's classifying the RAM, the memory of all these emotional experiences. And then the HPA, the messenger system. It clicks send through the body. This is what we need, hormones, response. This is what has to happen for action or for, whatever, to respond to what the amygdala is telling us all. Okay, so the smoke alarm, the watchtower, memory, messenger system. Hopefully those visuals help. I feel like I've given you a lot to kind of digest here, so I'm going to pause and I'm going to start a new recording, and you pace yourself and decide when you're ready to watch the various recordings this week. All right, I'll see you there.